Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights is one of the worst literary adaptations I've ever seen in my life, and to sum it up, Emerald thought she was making Romeo and Juliet. Strong belief in that fact. I think Emerald gives it away with the conversation between Isabella and Edgar early on, where they are literally discussing the Shakespearean work. The big problem is the novel itself has more in common with a story like Nosferatu than a story like Romeo and Juliet. The novel itself is not a romance, it is gothic horror. When I think about who I would love to see direct the actual story, because this is not the novel, it's something else. Two people pop to mind, it's Chloe Zhao and it's Robert Eggers. They would each smash this. As far as to say, this is not Wuthering Heights. The characters are not there, the themes are not there, the story is not there. This is something else, but Emerald Fennell wanted the safety of that name on her project. Conversation about Heathcliff has been deafening because this character is supposed to be anything but a white man. Problems with Heathcliff in the film somehow run much deeper. This is one of the most monstrous characters in the history of literature, and ironically, they did the same exact thing they did with Jacob Elordi in Frankenstein, which is to strip away all of the difficulty, all of the nuance, all of the challenge, and the monstrousness. Problem is, when you strip away the harsh edges of Frankenstein's creation and you strip away the harsh edges of Heathcliff, you do not have the characters anymore, you have something else. The biggest problems with this story is the dumbing down of the creation of Heathcliff, and a lot of that can be tied to Mr. Earnshaw. Played in the film by Martin Clunes, and he's essentially replacing Hindley Earnshaw. This man acquires the alcoholism and gambling problems of Hindley, and what Fennell decides to do to work around the race issue is basically make him an abuser of both Catherine and Heathcliff. The entire story being about cycles of violence, this eliminates the entire actual motivation for Heathcliff to become the person that he is. Mr. Earnshaw, who is kind to Heathcliff in the book and likes him, which creates the jealousy from Hindley, is turned into this vague, generic, drunk abuser character. You have Heathcliff basically stepping in to stop the abuse of Catherine, and this is where we get into another big problem, because they are tied together romantically as star-crossed lovers essentially from a very young age. Hindley is abusing Heathcliff. It is not just out of jealousy, it is tied to his race and it's tied to his social class. That's why even when Heathcliff comes back with all his wealth and power, they still pretty much view him in the same way and still treat him poorly because he cannot change who he is. It's how they look at his skin. When Heathcliff comes back in the novel, it's a Count of Monte Cristo style destruction of an entire family. He wants to destroy everything because he is an entitled narcissist and a misogynist who feels he is entitled to Kathy. Kathy also felt some entitlement to him early on, basically treating him as a pet. And Emerald Fennell does sort of maintain that in this story. In the novel, that's supposed to be a negative thing, right? It's a negative trait about Kathy. This story just plunges ahead with both of these people being whiny and obnoxious and toxic and unlikable. And it simply says, yeah, but don't you feel something about their relationship, which is only really physical, which never actually happens in the novel. Brings me to another aspect of this story, and it's both of their ages, which make this story feel kind of ridiculous, to be honest. I've seen a lot of people acknowledge that Margot Robbie is way too old to be playing this role. So is Jacob Elordi. You are watching a 35-year-old and a 28-year-old act like toxic morons. There's nothing cute or likable about this. One of the true tragedies of Kathy is that she is basically a kid when all this stuff happens. The bulk of the story, she's between 15 and 18 years old, basically being pushed into this loveless marriage from an economic standpoint, trying to worry about her family and their future, and Heathcliff to an extent. But that's happening while she's still so young. The fact that that love is never consummated, that there is no affair, it makes all of this that much more tragic. The relationship she's pushed into with Edgar Linton is supposed to be safe in every single way, especially economically, but also because of who he is in society and how he appears. He's a white guy. He is blonde. He is just kind of stale and boring. That's who he is. And she casts Shahzad Latif, who has Pakistani heritage, in this role. It is again like she's purposefully fucking missing the point. He has these two grown-ass adults acting like narcissistic idiots, carrying on this ridiculous affair. We're supposed to feel a single thing for these selfish, whiny, and entitled characters. While she takes Joseph, who's supposed to be absolutely horrible and a religious zealot, and turns him into this nice guy who's also just kind of kinky. Takes Alison Oliver's Isabella Linton and basically turns her into a punchline, right? This is a naive and innocent person who is a domestic violence victim. She gets the brunt of Heathcliff's rage taken out on her. Physically and emotionally abuses her to the point that he drives her away as she is pregnant. It's a smooth-brained version of the story, right? So Heathcliff can't actually be a monster. He can't, be a misogynist piece of shit who thought he had a claim to Kathy and now takes that out on Isabella when he is denied what he feels he's owed. He just is kind of a, rough and tumble heartthrob. Crazy thing about this movie is it takes away a lot of the sympathy that you should have for Kathy, and then it pretends that she is still a victim, largely a victim of Nellie, who is crucial to the novel, serving as a narrator, perhaps an unreliable narrator, but not a clean-cut villain. So what Emerald Fennell does is take this white character from the novel, cast Hong Chow, and then basically make her a villain. You're supposed to be on some level cheering for this, and Nellie is standing in the way of it. Then something else happens that's very large that I won't spoil, that kind of makes it very straightforward as to how this story views Nellie. Word, everything about this movie is shallow. All of the important context has been stripped away from almost every single character. The entire supernatural aspect of this story has been stripped away, which makes it far more interesting. The idea of still wanting to possess, physically or mentally someone after your death. There's nothing more toxic than that, and that is what this story is. It is a warning about this toxic, all-encompassing type of romance. And it's willing to look at how society created all of this. There's another reading where you can say that Emily viewed Kathy very much as a self-insert character herself. Then you can start to really closely look at her portrayal of Heathcliff and Nellie, and also Joseph, all the working class characters in the book. I consider a lot of those readings of the original novel to be very cynical, but I think they are somewhat valid. The novel still had so much to say, and so much of it has been stripped out of this story to just give us something that is bare bones and easy to digest. The movie is very nicely shot by Linus Sandgren. I will give Emerald Fennell a compliment. I think she has a good eye. I think she's a solid director. She can not write. Production design is sometimes beautiful, sometimes tedious, and self-indulgent. Score from Anthony Willis is sometimes beautiful, sometimes mundane. The stuff from Charlie XCX, I don't really know why it was in the movie. It's an odd choice. Today, these two undeniably beautiful and talented people are trying to hide a bad script, and they're trying to drape this movie in cinematography and the score, and trying to trick you into believing there is something more here under the surface. The film is repetitive. Everything is on the nose. The prologue is not there. The second half of the book is not there either. So we don't get to actually see a real satisfying conclusion to the cycles of violence and abuse that the entire story is about. At the end of the day, I'm begging filmmakers to stop doing this to classic literature. Please just take a chance and write your own story.